Disney has captured the hearts of children worldwide. But what if I told you that African stories are just as magical, maybe even more powerful, if we tell them the right way? Now, storytelling shapes how children see the world, how they believe things, what they believe, how they interact with their peers, their parents, and the society in general, right? Disney gives us princesses, castles, magic, and happy endings. But most of these stories are not rooted in reality. It is fantasy, fairy tales, things that are not real, right? Nigerian or African folk tales like the tortoise and the bird, Anansi the spider, Why the Sky is Far Away, carries lessons about honesty, greed, wisdom, and community. Now, many African kids grow up knowing a lot of Western cartoons. I can tell you for a fact that if you ask any random child right now to tell you their favorite five of their favorite cartoons, not even one of them will be Nigerian or African, right? But they do not know their own heroes, their own culture, their own tradition, their own values through storytelling. And it's funny that this creates such a huge cultural gap where African stories are seen as lesser, right? Or even forgotten because kids are focusing on they are being infused with Western media, and there's literally no African or Nigerian storytelling in their media, especially when it comes to the media. Now, I'm not talking about school. For their schools, we know that most of the books they use, depending on the school, even most of the books they use are Nigerian. In some schools, some of the books they use are Nigerian books. But I'm speaking specifically about the children industry in entertainment, the children media content industry. Generally, it is so westernized. Now, I'm not trying to say we should reject the Western media for children. I'm not trying to say we should reject Disney, Netflix, and the other platforms. What I'm simply saying is we need to create balance, right? As much as our kids are watching Western content, I can tell you for a fact that Western culture or Western society are not being shown African content as much as they are not consuming as much African content as we are consuming African content, Western content here in Africa. Now, the truth is, African stories are being modernized and packaged properly. Animation, colorful illustrations, theater production, relatable settings to our African story, environment, cities, landscapes that kids actually recognize and can see themselves in the story. Now, African stories also carry universal lessons. No, Disney teaches love, bravery, fairy tale. African stories or folk tales teach wisdom, fairness, and respect for elders. There's this culture, the African culture is so peculiar to the African society that it will not be found in the Western media that our kids consume, right? Now, at the Imaginative Theatre, what I specifically do is to bring African stories alive on stage for children. Stories that are written for children, tailored to the needs of children, depending on their age range, right? We also have the Imaginative Tales and Wonders, where we create picture stories so children, African children, Nigerian children everywhere can access African storytelling, regardless of where they are in the world. They can access African storytelling. So you don't have to say, oh, because I'm not raising my kid in Africa or in Nigeria or my specific country, I cannot have access to African media for my child, right? We also have our ebooks for kids where we write specifically stories that are rooted in African culture, African tradition, and African values. Now, our folk tales, our African stories don't need to be in a competition with the Western media, right? What we need, in my opinion, I'd say what we need is balance, especially for children. I say it in all my videos, and I truly cannot emphasize on it enough that we need to create a balance when it comes to media in Africa, especially for kids, right? We also need to be able to put out content that can stand side by side with the Western content. Now, I'm not specifically talking to parents or educators. I'm speaking to other theater artists out there. You know, some of us study theater arts and go into other things. I believe that there's a really wide gap that needs filling, especially in the children industry. When it comes to children entertainment, we have so many creative people in the African space, the Nigerian space, that are into these things. We need you to, step up your game, put out more works to help elevate the African media, especially in the kids industry. Now, the truth is, if we lose our stories as Africans, we will lose our culture, we will lose our value, we will lose everything that makes us African, and that is what makes us unique, right? And I don't think we want to lose our uniqueness. But if we tell our stories the right way, our children will definitely know our stories, remember our stories, and for the value of it, understand who they are and where they come from.